part 2 of our discussion with Jamie DeWolf, who is a performer, filmmaker, writer, live event producer, arts educator, and circus ringmaster from Oakland, California. His films have won over 35 international awards. He's written and performed with inmates at San Quentin Penitentiary, won Performance of the Year by NPR's Snap Judgment, was voted Best Poet and Best Filmmaker from the East Bay Express. And Jamie has had lots of involvement leading workshops in universities, working with youth, and he is also in high demand as a variety show host in the Bay Area and beyond. He's a regular MC and curator for circus troupes, vaudeville shows, and music festivals across the U.S. As you likely heard before from part 1, there is so much to say about Jamie's artistic bio and the breadth of work that he has contributed. So please do check that out. His website is listed below. And for the purposes of this podcast, Jamie is wearing a different hat that is his birth legacy, that of L. Ron Hubbard as his great-grandfather, the founder of Scientology. I must say that it was an absolute delight to speak with Jamie, and I hope that you all find his insights, his deep knowledge about cultic principles, and certainly about Scientology, not just as an organization, but also as a legacy with patterns that exist across many other similar groups. So I'm sure that you will find Jamie's perspective thought-provoking, if not enlightening, as it's obvious that he has personally been rigorous in considering and pursuing the deconstruction of established beliefs and has paved his own path through the lens with which he has chosen to see this world. So with that, I welcome you back, Jamie DeWolf.
It's just amazing to me of how many people have blasted Scientology around me, and even my own family, and are super Christian, super Christian. And so if I was to, so I've always felt just so in such a strange world. And because even when I talk about religion, it's like I can deconstruct Scientology in complicated ways and also just really shorthand ways and just make a bunch of jokes about it. But then when you get to Christianity, it's like, well, don't touch that. That's sacred, right? And that is exactly how Scientology and all these religions work. Nothing is sacred, because the only reason why it's sacred is because someone told you that, who has power, and they would lose power if you started to bring incisive, critical thought to it. It's the same as like, well, let's not ask about the priests and the children. They're priests. They are divine. Like, no, they're not. They're a guy wearing a fucking outfit, and that guy is raping children. So, no, you don't get any religious protection because you fucking say so. It's just, there is no magic. Like, if you just are able to look at is every religion, take out the humanity of their so-called magic, and then take away the real magic. Like the good stuff, the community, the divine moments that you can have with yourself, the transcendent moments that you can have in deep kind of states. Like hypnosis is real. These deep kind of reverential states are real. But when you have one person who's like in the way of that person is usually always getting something out of it that they're not being upfront about.
And I think sometimes, in these dynamics also, the community doesn't realize, but they are at fault for giving that power to that person, because if the leader doesn't have the followers Google-eyed over them, then they would just
if you take away the exactly if you take away the, like, Kundalini is your given example, is like, take the technique, take the movements, take the practice, but take the leader out of it. You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't he's just grabbing from other traditions. They're making a thing and they're learning a thing, and that's great, but they're just a man. You know, I mean, I think that's the main trick they have to have you believe, is that I am different than you.
Yes.
And I have a little special something extra that you will never have, and that's going to give me extra license to not have to answer every question, because, you know, faith, you, how dare you doubt me, you know, whatever, and to become something else, right? So, I mean, there's always this little interesting period when cults start, of when they're starting out, right? And like, they have to start convincing people. And there's almost always, in those early days, and a lot of these different kind of cults, there's usually like somebody else who's often their like financial benefactor, some kind of a bedrock inner circle person, and many times they'll carry over to years and years, and they're always right there. They're always visible in the cult, and they're kind of like a secret hand in a way. And they're not like the mayor, they're not on Front Street, but they are part of the bedrock that is, you know, funding it, is keeping them in control. And because you need to find these other people that are going to put you up on this larger than life pedestal. And the longer that you're on that pedestal, the more you're going to start to actually believe it. You know, that you're going to start to exploit it and use that for your own gains. And I mean, a lot of folks listening to this right now could think that I'm profoundly cynical, and that's probably true. But I've also done a lot of reading and have talked to a lot of people who've been out of Scientology and other cults, and have wrestled with my own beliefs for so long. I mean, I thought I was going to be a minister when I was young, and that was I mean, my brother was raised in the same religion. None of that shit stuck with him the way it did with me. I mean, I was pretty fanatical, and I believed what they were telling me, you know? So when I was realizing on the playground that the kid across from me in the sandbox was going to burn in hell for all eternity in writhing, endless agony and torment because he was Jewish or because he was Muslim, I would cry. I would be in tears and would be traumatized sort of all day. And when they told us that Gorbachev was going to be the Antichrist and that his birthmark was the mark of the beast, I believed them, because that's what they were telling me was the truth. And so, you know, when you come out later and you're like, how do you excuse that? How do you excuse that, of doing that to children, of doing that to people, putting that bullshit poison in their heads? And if you start to ask that question, people say, "Hey, hold on. That's a religion. We can't." Yeah. You're like, how long do we, until when? Until what point? Every religion questions the other religions and say that one is fraudulent. Look at this, and this, and they don't want to look at it. It's just like, how long? And sadly, I mean, my cynical belief is like, well, apparently until we're fucking extinct. That's what
right. We could just go on and on and on and on this way.
That's what it feels like. It feels like we crash landed on a planet. Someone be like, well, I remember stories of back in the day, and I alone can find us a new way, and, you know, et cetera. And like someone starts drawing in the sand and they're like, let me tell you how things really happened. And then, you know, and you're like, trade me a seashell and I will tell you the true secret on right. Where we came from, you know?
Right. Yeah. And I think, Jamie, I mean, this kind of brings us back to, and I feel like we've kind of addressed this in our conversation. I mean, I so love this subject matter with you because, well, and let me back up for a second. I mean, one of the things I did hear you say, I hear the critical thinking in you. I guess you could say cynicism, but I also hear you saying that, you know, you're not removing space for people to have, and even I hear for yourself to have experiences that are, dare we say, call it somewhat divine, you know, connected right. to the flow or those moments where you're just,
Transcendent, I think, is a good, easy way. Like something that takes you out of being just a
Yeah.
monkey in flesh that needs to eat, you know, and sleep and make their way through whatever environment that we're in, like past the flesh. I think that, and there's just
And
also this odd,
communication is a part
yeah,
of that too. So I like that you said that, kind of past the flesh, because I think that's the other big draw, is that often in these groups we're talking about real stuff. We're talking
mm,
about real feelings. We're addressing things with each other. And that's part of the attraction, is like we all recognize on some level the truth, and that it feels good to be in what's real. And now that can,
mm,
of course, get murky, but
right, right. Well, I think that there's an odd lack of being able to embrace not knowing, you know, and that's
yes.
something that is such an odd contrast. If you look at how religion fights against science, and science is often argued to be by religion, it's just so exact and factual, but science is also very comfortable not knowing. You know, they're able to answer, I don't know, you know, I
Yeah.
don't know, and that's why we're asking these questions. We're interested. Maybe it's this. We have a theory. We have a hypothesis, you know, but religion is this odd other sense of certainty all the time of like, this is how it happened. There was 7 days and on the seventh day he rested. And like, you know, it was a rib that was taken out, and absolutely the woman listened to the talking snake. And that's why they have periods for all of the rest of their existence, you know, etc. It's just like
Yes.
this,
And,
the certainty and the control, and it's like, what is wrong with just not knowing? I mean, that's something I love about kind of like witchcraft and things like that, and also old like polytheism. I was saying this to my partner the other day. I was like, man, it's like all of our mythology just became so fucking treacherously awful once we went into this monotheistic mindset. Polytheistic religions are so much more awesome, because they have like this kind of random chaotic dynamic that just, it's like, why is this happening? Well, because this god has beef with this god, and this god slept with that god, and so, and they like, sometimes, you know, Zeus just comes down and he just tries to fuck a farm girl here and there, and he's like a little, you know, he's like a little reckless, and like Poseidon's not down with that, and you know, and Hades is a big grump, and you know what I mean, like there's just,
well, and the big thing about that is that they're imperfect. It's not the
exactly.
same line that they tout in cults, you know,
Right,
around
right.
perfection.
Right. There isn't perfection. And it also becomes even more transparent on how we're just literally fucking projecting like our own shit, you know, like Zeus and Hades and like Aphrodite. I mean, it's like you're just projecting human things to make sense of things that we don't have other ways to explain. And it's just really frustrating, especially in like 2020, you know, to see the same hooks continue to work, to have the same arguments. I mean, even in this last administration, to still having people fight against the science on a regular basis, to, you know, just constantly. It's like, and same with science. It's like, it doesn't mean that you can't accept or embrace the transcended or the unknowable, things that we don't understand or don't know. It's not like everything needs to be reduced to something bleak and like technical, but also what's wrong with that? And I think that
Yeah.
that's a really unfortunate aspect, is that really, especially when I talk about tracing the follow the money, or also like the root of like, with most religions, like asking yourself, where is the control in it? You know, where is the control? It's like there's always some lessons that were just often in there for just better living. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, like to just like, this is what you would, if you had to create a religion from scratch and people just did not know what to do, then you're like, okay, this is how we live, and this is why. You know, this is how we work, and this is, you know, what you do to take care of yourself physically. These are the crimes that we're going to need to make crimes, so society can exist, and we're all just flagrantly fucking lawless.
Yeah.
And like, but I mean, all the other control elements on
Yes.
like your mind and who should be in control through divine whatever, all that shit should always just, that should be always looked at rather critically.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing we're still at this point where you're going to get shouted down. I mean, here's something I've said to my daughter. And I'm like, I doubt I will ever. We have a female vice president now. That's amazing. Female black vice president. It's amazing. I will probably die before we ever see anybody close to an atheist president. It's just probably not going to happen. You probably can't have someone being like, I don't really believe in that. You know what I mean? Like, they're just, I don't, yeah. They're like, what if the lake of fire and the Antichrist and Armageddon? They're like, yeah, I just don't really need to believe in it. You know what I mean? Like, they don't. They all have to show up at church. Even Donald Trump, for fuck's sake, the fundamentalists are 100% behind. Boggles my mind. That guy never even had to pretend to go to fucking church. But he just makes a few sentences here and there, like once a year or something.
And inappropriately stands up with a Bible for a photo op.
I know, exactly. And it's so transparent. Like, are you fucking kidding me? And anyway, I just imagine Donald Trump on the golf course and someone asks him, like, so you're going to church? Like, what do you think his answer would be? You think, I mean, I wish I could be there in terms of him laughing as he's like, are you kidding me? Church is for losers, you know, or whatever he would say.
I know. Well, kind of in this same context. And again, I am so appreciating this, Jamie, because one of the things that this whole discussion, because one of the things that has been on my mind, especially with the political climate in the U.S., is that, and of course, as I, explore these issues and all the nuances and the dynamics around cults, is I feel so strongly in myself the importance for me to kind of hold this whole gray space between the black and white. And really wanting to explore that and have room for it. And I'm finding, we had this moment in our family where one of the younger generational people kind of said, I'm never even going to talk to anybody, or I'm not going to be friends with anyone or I'd never date a guy that was a Trump person. And, it kind of stopped me dead in my tracks where I went, this is a young adult that is exposed to our beliefs. And that's what she's coming out of this with. And I went, we maybe need to change our conversation a little bit, because to have that kind of slam down and kind of dismissing an entire group of people, I went, are we then doing what the other side is doing? And so really going like, how do we open our minds and hearts to one another to actually enter into dialogue? And then where that brought me was, that can be, with certain people, challenging for me. And I feel pretty balanced around things. I mean, I really want to be able to have these conversations. I think it's really important that we get to know each other and understand one another. I mean, even, I was speaking to somebody yesterday who interviewed a right-wing extremist white supremacist. And he was saying to me that when he actually listened to this guy, his hopes and fears are really kind of like ours. And so it was just interesting to me to go, yeah, where can we hold this space to explore and discuss? And maybe there's no opportunity for that in a black and white mentality, but where there is, I want to be a part of it. And it's just an interesting, how do we hold that space?
That's a great point. I mean, also not to completely derail into politics so we don't lose our mind, but I think also that a lot of the issue is the dichotomy of black and white, red and blue, this sort of binary mentality. I think it's incredibly dangerous. And I think also as a Christian kid, is I think a lot of that has been reinforced by the Judeo-Christian mentality, this monotheistic, patriarchal religion based, that there is no feminine presence, there is no gray in the middle. There's literally heaven, hell. That is it. Even the Catholic Church got rid of limbo. I don't know if anybody was paying attention a couple of years ago. They actually said they got rid of limbo, and they said it had always been, quote, a theological hypothesis. I'm not making this shit up. And I about screamed in the street that the Catholic Church was using a phrase for the scientific process to get rid of limbo. Anyways, I digress. But I mean, that having the black white and the let's look at QAnon as one example. I don't want to waste a lot of time in going into why is QAnon fraudulent bullshit. Yes, it is absolute insane fraudulent bullshit. Also, the guy there's like, what is crazy to me is it's another perfect example of what I'm talking about, of this sort of how you need to deconstruct things critically. Like something like QAnon, you're like, okay, so someone is a conduit, right? They're saying, I have all of this secret knowledge and I alone am on the inside and I am giving it to you. Okay, so instead of asking like, oh, wow, what's intoxicating is that you become part of this secret elite, that you alone are cracking these codes. You alone know the secrets. You can only communicate with other people that know the secrets. The enemies are clearly defined so that the media is trying to destroy it, that this entire democratic, blood-drinking, pedophile, sex trafficking empire is trying to all shut it down with Hillary Clinton and her cronies, and that you have a sort of mental trap door in it. So is that anything that's against QAnon, or if their prophecies don't come true, are fake news, or that Trump is hiding something, or it's a deep state, or whatever. But I mean, it starts to make your own sort of mental kind of gymnastics in order to explain why things aren't happening when they predict something and it doesn't happen that day and so forth. But again, it's also like, why aren't people more thoroughly investigating who is this person telling you these things? Who is this Q person? Instead of just investigating what they say, investigate who they are. And journalists have, and they pretty sure that they know who it is saying all the messages now. It's the fucking guy who runs 4chan. And why is he doing it? Because it gets him internet traffic and gets them money. I mean, it's like you can usually reduce these things down to simplistic forms of why is Donald Trump so insistent on fake news? Because then you won't investigate any of his real shit that he's done or any of the court cases that are affiliated against him. And then facts become negligible. And what does that do? It protects him. It protects the guy. And then he's going to sell it to you that it's about, cult leaders are always about, it's about us, but it's almost always about them.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's Donald Trump cared so much about America, like I always ask this to people, I was like, if he wants the wall so bad, why doesn't he pay for it? Like himself. He claims he's the richest guy in the world. Just buy it. Fucking buy the wall. Like, why are you making us all pay for it? You know what I mean? You pay for it. What the fuck? Like, what? And it's the same way now. They're like, donate to our campaign against fraud. It's like, why don't you pay for it? Why are we having to give you money to do something that is going to protect only you? You know what I mean? And that sort of thing. But to digress, I mean, I think the black and white mentality is incredibly dangerous. And also it's like when you talk to an ex-Scientologist, for instance, I keep using Scientology because obviously it's a bit more my wheelhouse,
yeah, please.
I suppose. But I mean, you can use these as different models. And I think it's important, even in terms of the theme of your show and when people come out of it, is so when people leave Scientology, if you've never been in Scientology or you don't understand Scientology, some of the questions that people have are like, how could you believe such crazy shit about these aliens? And how could you spend so much money on this thing that's obviously a cult? How could you believe in L. Ron? These are the kind of questions that people even ask me, right? And I was never a Scientologist. So like, there's the evil galactic warlord Zeno, and it's a sci-fi writer who's selling you how the fuck could you believe all that, et cetera. So is the process of indoctrinating you is is the hook. Is you're on a path of self-betterment, right? So there's many different levels to that, but I mean, it's a noble cause for a lot of it when they start. And that's easy for people to forget, is that a lot of people when they get in cults is because they honestly want to be better people. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. They want to be better. They want to be more in control of their life, of their emotions, of their relationships. They're coming from something awful in their past. And people are always like, oh, well, they become in cults, you have to be broken or susceptible. And I don't honestly think that that's always true. Right. Obviously, that makes it easier. But I mean, Scientology wanted people with money. So they were often looking for urban professionals. NXIVM wanted people with money. They weren't going to Skid Row and recruiting. They want people with money. And they will take every dollar that you have until the end day. But I mean, so you start off with a good reason. And then the indoctrination is so regimented and is so far more effective than most people could ever be prepared for. That there are all different kinds of techniques that are being used on you at the same time. Most people, no matter how strong-willed they are or what they think of their spirit or their will, at a certain point, a lot of these mechanisms are all going to start working in some way. There's a theology, which is what everybody focuses on when you're outside of a cult looking in, but they're not thinking about the social dynamics, so that when you have these upper levels, that when you move ahead a level, then you feel like you're on a path to something, and that there's people above you who won't tell you what's in those paths, and you can't tell the people below you what's on your path. So that also causes its own mental shift, because if you have doubts about what you're learning, that you don't really have many people you can share it with. Yeah. You know what I mean? You can only share it with the people who are above you, and if they have their own doubts, they can't share where they're at, because there's this different kind of secret differing levels. Then there's also always the mental hijack of saying, well, if it's not working for you, it's because you're not doing it right, or you're not working hard enough, or you don't have the discipline, or you're not putting in enough money or enough work or whatever. So those social factors are profoundly effective in terms of keeping people moving forward and digging themselves in deeper. And another is the enemies. The enemies is so etched in terms of, for Scientologists, is that they are constantly telling you that SPs, suppressive persons, people like myself, are attacking Scientology. They want to destroy Scientology. And I mean, if Scientology is listening right now, yes, I do think Scientology I think it should end. I think it's done. I think it's a criminal organization that should have stopped with L. Ron and all of his mythology, should have ended with him in the grave. And I think everything that's happening now is just a disgusting, parasitic money machine that preys on people. If you're listening. But moving on is that you define the suppressive people, the people who are attacking you. So those may be ex-members and maybe the media, journalists, law cases, anything that will actually expose the religion. You have to shut that shit down so no one is curious about it. They don't want to know about it. So you seriously define the enemies. And the more vivid and crazy you can make them, the better. And often you'll ascribe to them shit that is absolutely morally repellent to most people. They're rapists, they're pedophiles, they, whatever it is, that they drink the blood of innocents, you know what I mean? That anything to make you hate this person, these people, and to make them an active opponent. So you self-police your own critical thought. Then another thing happens is that the longer that they're in Scientology, there's also a certain elitism that starts to happen, and a kind of arrogance that can happen with cults. And I know this is a little ugly, and a lot of people don't like to talk about it because it can feel gross when you're trying to have compassion for them later. But because of these enemies are so clearly defined, at the same time, you're constantly being told that you are the chosen, you are the elite. That, in Scientology is that you have gone through so many souls and incarnations to come back to this moment to help save the world, to save the universe. You alone are like the elite. I mean, the Sea Org basically view that they're the elite, like the upper echelon. And you're taught that and told that over and over and over. You are enlightened. You are on the path. You alone can do this. You have the secrets that nobody else does. So that causes its own kind of arrogance in its way. And that arrogance is also really integral at moving you forward. And when people start to come out of a cult, I think one of the most painful steps that a lot of people don't like to talk about is how humiliating it is, how much shame is a part of the process of realizing that you were so arrogant towards all of these individuals, suppressive people, the journalists, the media, the whatever. People are often trying to help you. They're trying to get you out. Your family members who are trying to get you out. That you were a part of engineering that, because no cult is truly successful unless they can make you do a lot of those steps on your own. You know, your mom calls, you won't answer because she doesn't believe in your theology. You cut your family out of your life. That you still have to do it. I mean, when cults just straight literally take you over and like kidnap you and, you know, etc., they fall usually pretty quickly because it's a hard thing to cover for a long time. They need you to do a lot of these things on their own. So that arrogance and that shame of knowing that you were also part of it, that you were part of the process, that when you were part of Scientology, that you also were paying people to brainwash you. You were taking your money and handing it to someone and saying, worm your shit in my brain and let's see what happens to it. And that is incredibly painful for people to deal with. And then also to realize that a lot of that arrogance not only was built on sand and was built on lies, but you were a part of a cult. Like, you were part of a thing that some people even view as weak, you know, and that's also a really wrenching, painful experience to go through that cycle, and then to sort of try to emerge and take what you to make some of the hardest critical thought decisions you're going to make, which a lot of society hasn't made, which is to take elements from what you've learned that you still respond to and that you've got something good out of, and administer them to yourself or use them in your own kind of steps forward, and then to kind of form your own new theology on, like, what do I believe now? You know, I mean, someone who comes out of QAnon, it's like, well, yeah, that whole paranoid fantasy is bullshit. But are people in politics lying to you? Yes, like, absolutely. Like, are there conspiracies? Yes, absolutely. There's definitely people in power who are lying on large lies that they fund and that they try to cover up to get away with shit. So you have to kind of come through on the other side and be able to take things the way, to dismantle them in your kind of own painful way. And that is such a rough process.
I am delighted to offer you Pure Haven products. All proceeds received go right back to the Project Hope podcast. I myself have been using these pure, safe, and toxin-free products for over 4 years, and I absolutely love knowing that my home has countertops that my little niece and nephew can eat off of without worrying that they have a handful of chemicals being placed in their mouths. The cleaning products are some of my favorites. The glass and surface cleaners smell amazing as well. So if this is of interest to you, please go to purehaven.com/Jennifer French. The link is also included below with information about this podcast segment. A rough process and such an individual and personal process, because Absolutely. Each one has taken in all of these different things. I mean, I actually laughed. I am hoping in the future to interview Sarah Edmondson, who's part of the Nexium group. Uh-huh. And I had this moment with her the other night when we were speaking where we were acknowledging her kind of multitasking and doing all this stuff. And she's super busy right now. And And I had this moment with her where I laughed and said, well, Nexium skills coming into play. And she laughed and said, not only now, but even in getting out, to actually use some of those skills. I mean, it sounds so crazy, but it is true.
Right.
We have to just take what we believe is the goodness, and very much I was kind of in the same mentality, where I felt like I was highly functioning, highly productive, my output was beyond what I've ever done before in my life. And it is true that now I use some of those skills to keep myself on track or focused or more productive than I probably otherwise ever would have been had I not had that experience.
There's a reason why it works. I mean, there's a reason why these things work. Like, there's a reason why military boot camp will train you to be a killer.
Yes.
Because these steps work. They've figured out ways in terms of hardening you or chiseling down your focus. Just using boot camp as a good example. But like, should you go and constantly for the rest of your life believe in America and why they're telling you to kill this person, or why the reasons you're going to war, whether it was the Iraq war, which they've admitted later was false, these kinds of things, that you're fighting for a false story. However, when you get out, that doesn't mean that you should stop doing push-ups, or like that militant precision, like these, same with Scientology, a lot of these techniques are valid in some elements. I mean, like there are levels of communication, on focus, on even hypnosis, and putting yourself in these kind of trance-like states. Also, a lot of, even to Scientology, so many people are just helped by the fact of like talking about their lives and like getting through, like so many of these elements we all need in some way. We need some kind of a leader, someone to be like, this is a better way of doing things, some kind of a physical practice, some kind of sense on communal laws, what's okay, what's not. It takes a shitload of spine in order to be able to determine a lot of that for yourselves. And depending through all the different social circles you move through, they're all kind of different, and I just aesthetically, I moved through a lot of different circles, like circus and the performance poetry world and theater and freestyle battle rap. And there are all these different aesthetic cultures. They have sort of different pillars of the community, whatever that is, the heroes of the models who are like the leaders of it. Yes. And then there's also the kind of their own sort of traditions and pseudo history, and like what is praised in those communities and what's not, you know what I mean? What, and like that sort of thing. And so just as one example, but I mean, to kind of even make it more personal, is that when I was deconstructing myself from Christianity, and a lot of it started with Christian questions, and trying to just learn more about Christianity. I tried to read as much as I could about it, and Dead Sea Scrolls, Council of Nicaea, also asking really difficult theological questions that didn't make a lot of sense to me, like all the Jews in the Holocaust would then have to go to hell because they technically weren't Christians. That was a huge question to me that really, really bothered me when I was young. The Adam and Eve question, and just there being two people that have two sons and one kills the other one. So there's three people on the planet. Where did the rest of humanity come from? Were they all where were the other peoples, etc. These kinds of things, just asking pointed questions and having them sort of unspool like a ball of yarn that's just kind of coming apart. And I would keep asking these questions. I'd ask them of my ministers. I'd ask them in class. And the whole time is I'm also being told that to ask these questions puts my soul on a path to hell, that it's actually the devil is coaching me, that the devil's in my ear. And that's that perfect example of self-policing, is that I'm by myself. No one's around. No one's telling me what to do. And I'm in the library and I won't pick up certain books because I think the devil is making me do that. Or is perfect example of self-policing. They have to be able to control you without even being there. And then as I started to read more and kind of then I started to ask a larger question of like, what if this wasn't written by God? God? What if this is written by people, just people? And then like, why would they write that? Who were these people if they were people? And then this is translated. So who translated? That was a person. What if none of this was written by God and a bunch of people wrote this? And then that led me down a different rabbit hole. And then it started a larger question of like, what if none of this shit is true? What if this is just a mixtape of old stories that have just been translated and hodgepodged and edited, and it's just a big old mess of things? Then like setting the Bible down and then looking around and seeing the United States and seeing how saturated and drenched the entire psychology of the American consciousness is. In particular, I've never been a European, so I can't speak to other countries, but I know it as an American who grew up Christian, how saturated it is part of our every bedrock piece. And I mean, when they act like we aren't going to war against Muslims, you're like, yes, we are. Like, that's what we believe. That's what we're about. Like, that's part of this theology. And you set it down and then look at history and everything that's been dictated. And I mean, I paid a serious price for it. I mean, my parents and I had a huge rupture. If I didn't have a child at that time, I don't know how or if my relationship would have been able to be repaired with my parents. I mean, they saw that I was falling from God. I was choosing the path of damnation and hell. And that I had been on a path to be a minister, and that the devil and all of his tricks had taken control of their son. And I also had to question that. I had to be like, is this just the devil winning? And to go for half my life, my entire life at that point, to believe that hell was an ever-present thing, that I was dooming myself, that I was choosing that, and to make the jump of saying, what if hell doesn't exist? What if hell was made up by people as a form of control? Wait a minute, what else is a form of control? And then realizing that my parents and I were not going to be able, because they could only see it in binary. They could see it as you're either going to heaven or you're going to hell. And I was like, Mom, what if there is no hell? Then can't we talk about what else is possibly going on here? And that's just, the conversation's never been resolved. I mean, they are still just as religious, and we just don't talk about it. And instead, I go on podcasts and rant and froth at the mouth for hours about it, because clearly I got a lot on my chest about it. You know?
Thank you for doing it here.
I'm just like, yeah, I think it's probably has to be one of the reasons why I am able to continue to talk about Scientology, because it's its own thing, of course, and I think it's a malignant cancer on the world that needs to be removed and cut out and buried. And I also, though, I'm just like, people should be asking these larger questions, like, what other thoughts control you and control your behavior, and did you put them there? Did you volunteer for all of them, or did you just take them in? I mean, COVID is a good example. It's like, how long has America told itself that we are the best and baddest country in the world? And you're like, at what? At what arena? Is it everything? Are we supposed to be the best at everything? Because here's a couple arenas we are most definitively fucking up on, you know? And I'm a big World War II fan, right? I mean, I just obsessively love reading about World War II. Have since I was a kid. Partly because as a kid, it felt like that binary battle, right? Nazis versus the best bad guys ever, you know? God, it's like they dressed like they knew they were going to be the best bad guys of all time, like red and black, just, you know what I mean? Like they had no illusions that we're going to be heroic someday. They're like, we are going to dress like an army from hell, you know? And then, you know, and reading American books about World War II. And then you read enough books and you realize that, like, America didn't win World War. Like, we were, like, Russia super crushed Germany. Like America kind of showed up and yeah, we did our thing, but like we weren't the reason only, you know what I mean? And so you just sort of change your perspective. And then also realizing that a lot of military people actually didn't view it as binary as we're sold. And if they really did, they wouldn't have shipped over a whole gang of Nazi scientists. And because then they made a new binary and they made like Russia the new bad guys. And then I'm just like later wondering how all of our consciousness of like red and blue states and Trumpism and Democrats. And so you keep seeing it shoved in these binary boxes. And you're like, that's clearly just not how the universe intrinsically seems to operate. You know, there's predators and prey, and there's, you know, but there's also all kinds of different combinations and like gender and what prey will eat, and like what do they cannibalize their young? Are they just that cynical? Like they'll just eat anything, and you know, so what is, etc. I mean, just all of those kinds of I don't know. I'm completely going off
that you can
the
see
railroad tracks here.
No, I love it. I mean, that you can see it in all these different areas of life. And I think even to the extent, I mean, to kind of come full circle back into family and your discussion around family in that environment, well, we all kind of grow up in the cult of family, right? Because our family has a certain mentality of some sort.
And even cultures, they'll say family is the most important thing. And I even asked that later. I was like, is it? I was like, they're just related to us. Like they're related to us. But it's like, I mean, I've also told other people, especially when they come from traumatic families, right? Is I'm like, make your own family, you know, and that's what a lot of cults will tell you. They're like, we're your family now.
That's right.
And so there's just a lot of choice. Like people have more choice. And I think that there's a lot to be said about when you think you believe something, like, do you actually believe it? Or was that something that you were taught and something that you were told? And a lot of times when you follow that route of like, when I sort of use the kind of follow the money critical little thread line, why I always say the follow, it's of course cynical, and I read a lot of true crime, and that is a way to really deconstruct crime right away. You're like, who is the criminal here? You're like, where's the money going? Ah, there we go. You're the criminal. No matter who's hiding behind whatever guys. But is a lot of times the follow the money is also just like follow the power. Like who is telling you the thing and why? Because often they're the ones that are in power of it. I mean, you look at patriarchy and things like that. It's like the people telling the story of patriarchy are men, you know, so that they retain the power. And then it's like you get these good moments in cultural consciousness where people are like, wait a minute, this is a bullshit story. And like, who's telling me this story? Men are telling me this story. They're like, okay, no, you know what I mean? Like, we're going to make a new story. And then when you change the story, you change the narrative, then I think people are able to have a real conversation. And I think it's the same with Trumpism, right? Or QAnon. Some people say it's a Scientologist. Have you ever tried to talk to a Scientologist? And I always say no. I'm like, why? You know, like if they really want to talk, okay. But honestly, no, because most of the time if I'm going to talk to a Scientologist, like I'm like, okay, who's recording and watching this conversation? And then like, is this person going to report me and follow me home? And like, it's just a dangerous proposition. But also is that there's so many mental mechanisms that they are carrying in their head that are going to shut down literally everything I say. Or if they even know who I am, then they're just going to discount it because they're already self-policing. And you need to get past that. Like, the way that you get people out of cults often is one trick, and I won't say who told it to me. But anyways, is that you start with what is good about the theology, right? What are you getting out of it? So when you talk about like Trumpism, right, is that like what are people
like
what do people
understanding and alignment?
Well, what's the good out of it? I mean, is that it's easy to be like, Trump is this fucking bullshit con man, he's a racist, you know, et cetera. To start, they're not looking at it that way. Like, a lot of times it's like, what is the good out of it? They're like, well, I want America to be first. I don't want to be in all these other foreign wars. You'd be like, okay. They're like, I want my manufacturing jobs to come back. You're like, okay. You're like, I don't want my cities on fire. Totally. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you start with the things that make sense, that are the good of the theology, of Scientology. I want to be a better person. Awesome. You know, I've gone through these traumatic experiences and I wanted to relieve them from my mindset, become more optimistic. I'm like, awesome. You start with the things that are valid or feel valid. And then you start kind of picking the holes. And it's going to take them a while to get to the point where they're like, oh, you know what? I do want to read about Trump's tax records that the New York Times already has. You know what I mean? They already have literally the fucking smoking gun proof. L. Ron Hubbard, you can get his military record. You know what I mean? You can read his diary entries, like in court transcripts that are about brainwashing and doing sex magic. You know, you can read it, but I mean, to get there is like 200, 300 steps. You know what I mean? So you start with Kundalini Yoga. You're like, hey, let's talk about why we like doing this. How do I feel when I come out of a class? You know, what is good about it? Then you start getting to the point of like, okay, let's talk about the teacher now. Do you know what I mean? Like, let's talk about like the creepy teacher that is trying to bang his students, you know, and that's where the thing starts to really unspool. And you kind of see that what happening with Nexium as well, is that like they would defend Keith to the dying moment and are probably discounting. They'll just mentally discount it because it's not relevant to their actual experience, and their experience is what was helping them in the journey. You know, with Christianity, it's that they don't want to hear about the Nicene Council and fucking all this other shit that I'm saying. They want to say, I feel really good at church when I'm there and we're all singing together. You know, I feel good when there's someone that will forgive me of my sins, you know, no matter what I have done. Hold on one second.
Yeah, and you'll see, you know, this is reminding me actually a little bit of, I don't know if you've seen The Vow.
I haven't. I wanted to, and I was like, man, do I want to pull? I've read tons of everything on the Nexium, and I'm often on the fence about cults sometimes,
right?
Where I'm just like, do I want to? You
want to sit there and
myself, you know? And people are like, oh, you should see this new cult thing, you know? And I'm like, do I want to? You know, it's like telling a World War vet that, you know, you should go watch Saving Private Ryan or something. You're like, do I really? You know, I mean, I think there's a lot of my experiences of Scientology, like a lot of people don't even know, you know, I haven't been public about, and they don't know how sort of deep it's gone. And when you're really looking in the kind of eye of that hurricane and you're face to face in a private room hearing what they've gone through or their stories or things that they don't want to say out loud, it's pretty awful. I mean, it's really awful. I think it's easy for society to mock those who've gone through cults, or act like they don't understand it, and that's why I always just yell on my soapbox about just thought and Christianity in particular, because I'm like, that's something that almost everybody is touched by. You can't even buy a fucking donut without having a god on your shit and the fake story of some guy you don't know that you've been sold as mythology that's infused in your American theology. You know what I mean? Like, it's already all around us and we just discount it. And
I love that is kind of the angle. It's really quite brilliant, honestly. But I was going to say also so you've got The Vow, and then also there's a 4-part series that's come out that's really India Oxenberg's story. Mm-hmm. And what is so well done in both of these but especially interesting in India's story because it's just her. The intimacy with which you start to get to know what these people were going through. And with India in particular, in the last episode, as everything's falling apart, she still remains there, and she's actually by herself, like physically. And yet she hasn't connected yet into kind of the world and her mother and all that. And it's very, I think that's where these shows really provide so much, is in helping people. It's sort of like when the person's right there on the screen in front of you and you can feel them and hear them and you see those tears, you get it in a different way.
Yeah, it gets it away from the wacky theology shit. I mean, Scientology, they're like, what's this evil galactic warlord Xenu and all of this craziness? Nexium, it's sex cult branding. But that's not what these people's true experience is about. I mean, they're on a path where they're trying to often make themselves into a better person. They have that sense of purpose. They have a sense of investment in what they're trying to become and the effort that they'll put in for it. And again, you have that sort of arrogance that can come with it. It might not be that for every single person. They might not be arrogant. But I mean, there's certainly a level of like confidence that I am on the right path that few know about, and I'm becoming better than I was, better than what other people are. And if you get into a point of recruiting people, you're like selling the same story and that kind of thing. And so then to come out the other side, and then your kind of figure is exposed in such an ugly way for any of these leaders that finally get exposed, because it's usually not, when they fall, it's usually not just like, oh, I lied about a few things or here and there. I mean, like, Keith's text messages are like out there, and you're just like, it has to be a repugnant feeling, especially like when people read, when they really go down the L. Ron Hubbard rabbit hole and they start to learn all this other crazy shit that's all over the world and on the internet that you can just download the secret levels, and they're just that sort of horror of internalizing that and wrestling with it and then fighting your way to a new mindset in a world that is full of insane mindsets is, I think, probably one of the hardest phases that I don't think gets addressed a lot. A lot of it is like, okay, you're going to get out of a cult, and then people think that they're going to realize, it was all a sham. What a bunch of bullshit. And then they're going to know the leader was a liar. And then it's the most important question is, and then what? Then what do they believe?
Well, right? And then there's going to be total happiness because I finally woke up and left this thing that's bad, again, kind of back to the black and white.
Right. And now
that's a shock.
Right. And then now you're in this new murky ass world of a whole shitload of belief systems, pick one, that are full of a whole gang of other liars, you know what I mean? From fitness gurus and vitamin companies and whatever. I mean, there's a million hustles that are out there. And so having the kind of apparatus that's going to help you to get forward in the next step. I mean, I don't know. People will ask me at the end of the day, like, what do you believe? And it's like, I felt like for so long my life was just dominated by religion, by reacting to religion, to escaping religion, wrestling with religion. And I realized I was like, I really want a lot of my life where I just don't care. I just don't think about it. It's not like it's not that I don't feel like I'm not spiritual or something. It's like, I don't want to obsess myself anymore with all of the debris that's created by people in order to control other people and what they believe. Like, I just want to be okay with not knowing. I'll give you an example. I do tarot readings on occasion. Yeah. And I was going through a really, really rough like breakup in my life and was just completely fucking struggling. And a friend of mine who was far more cynical than me, one of the most abrasive cynics that I know, ended up becoming a lawyer. And so this guy is like a fucking realist. And he's like, you should get a tarot deck and do some tarot readings. And I said, what? I'm like, I can't believe you would recommend that to me. He's like, the cards are symbols. They're symbols. And what they do is that when I do a reading, is that it just helps my subconscious look at problems in a different way. And so it causes a different kind of problem solving process that I wouldn't normally naturally engage in. Which is also a hilariously realist way of looking at tarot cards.
Yeah. I love it.
And that's another example. Like, do I think that the gods are telling me what's going to be in the future? Like, no, some of them are just like, what's another way to look at this problem? And I'm going to throw this question out to the question mark. And, you know, if gods want to chip in and Zeus and, Pan and fucking pick one, wants to sing me a little song and tell me what I should decide next week, like, great. But I mean, I'm also just cool, like, not really knowing. I mean, because also there's just aspects I've seen as an artist of manifestation on a regular basis. I'm a performer and producer of shows, live shows, and a filmmaker. And I was saying this to a friend of mine the other day, is that what I love about filmmaking is that it's just a constant cycle of manifestation, of that you have an idea that you might just write down in a napkin, or you're talking about, or it's in a script, or like if you're writing something, I'm working on a new thing right now, and characters will just kind of start talking and take a life of their own. And I don't know where that comes from. You ask a lot of writers, like, where does your inspiration come from? I've had so many ideas that literally just pop right into my head, like they just walked in and demanded life, demanded a stage. I don't know where that's from, and I can call it the muses, which I like. It's just that sort of vague, the muses, the, etc. But then you take this thing, and it's just an idea or whatever it is, and then you figure out how to make it real, and you hire the actors, and you figure out the set, and then, like, sometimes days later, like, it's just completely some random joke that you had, and becomes this real thing. And that, I think, is also magic, and doesn't require a belief in gods, or sure as shit doesn't require me to pay someone else to tell me what idea I should have, and then because they have better than me, because blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Well, Jamie, I have to say thank you for the exploration that you have done, and your deep dive into all your religious exploration, because obviously it's brought you into the person that you are now. And it's been such a pleasure speaking with you. It's so refreshing. It's really, you just have so much to offer, from kind of knowing some of these nuances in terms of culty dynamics, and then really kind of bringing it out into humanness, this sort of exploration of, like, who are we as humans, and how do we exist in this way that serves in a healthy way?
Yeah. And what's next, and being okay to embrace the unknown in a way that feels healthy to yourself, and to also just forgive yourself for believing in whatever was fed to you, because I think that's also a human instinct.
Yes.
We look for guidance, and we need guidance, and it's no one's fault that you listen to the wrong advice, which is really what being a cult is at its just kindest level, is like, when people are coming out, you want to help them. It's just like, look, you got bad advice. You got really bad advice, and the source of your information was wrong, and that's okay, but, like, let's get better sources of information, that's for America also in this turning point. That's for everyone sort of wrestling with what's next. And I think you just really follow what you've been fed and kind of regulate your belief diet and cut out what isn't serving you. And if you can, or as they say in good diets, just eat lots of things because it's healthier that way. You just eat one fucking thing, it's usually your body doesn't like it, So
right, but explore, experiment, and then find what's true for you.
Exactly. I mean, anyone who tells you to read less on a subject should not be trusted. It's like every religion, every belief system, you should be able to read anything and everything you want about it. And the truth is often somewhere in the middle, somewhere. It's usually not in one book. It's in the library. The belief, the truth is in the library, not one book. My pithy quote of the day.
I love it. Thank you so much, Jamie DeWolf.
Thank you. It was fun, and I hope your listeners enjoy it.
Thank you for listening, everyone. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Jamie DeWolf as much as I did. In part 2, we discuss and ponder our discomfort with not knowing as a society. I'm calling that out because I think it's a key point in terms of whether we are susceptible to being drawn into a belief system. We also discuss reflections on questioning beliefs and being okay with the unknown. So I hope that you all enjoyed this discussion, and please join us again.